CTV News political commentator Scott Reid standing by with his take. And also the big news here, Scott, is this $5 billion fund that Mark Carney announced today to try and help Canadian businesses adapt to the trade war that we're now in with the United States, find new markets, new customers. There's also a big program about retraining Canadian workers who may be affected by this trade war as well. I know you were listening into some of what Pierre Poilievre had to say. Your takeaways here, the announcements we heard from Mark Carney and also the pushback from Pierre Poilievre.
Yeah, let's start with the Prime Minister, because it was a pretty comprehensive suite of measures. So what jumped out at me was the underlying assumption inherent in everything the Prime Minister said, which is there's no going back. There's no short-term fix. We're not going to actually go have a good meeting with Donald Trump in the White House and suddenly all of this is going to be a nightmare from which we wake. We are now looking at fundamental structural change in our economy. It's going to be painful. We've seen the job numbers hit today. We saw economic growth blasted last week. And I think you see a mix of measures, short-term supports for industries that are particularly hard hit, short-term support for workers who are in threat of losing their jobs and need retraining and need retooling, and longer-term incentives to try to shift our economy away from the United States, away from the dependency on their market, and toward either other markets around the world or buying our own, being our own best customer. Those are big changes. Those are big questions as to whether or not any of these measures today will be successful in that regard. But it was a fundamentally pessimistic outlook because none of it suggested, don't worry, it's going to get better.
All right, let's talk about Pierre Poilievre. And, he is rightly pointing out, and Jeremy just did as well in our interview with him, that this Prime Minister has now reversed two measures brought in by Justin Trudeau, one of them the carbon tax, and now hitting the pause on the electric vehicle mandate for next year. What's your take on that?
This really highlights the difficulty of being the leader of the opposition in this situation. So his first impulse is to say, well, it's yet another reversal that we called for that takes you away from what Trudeau was doing. Hooray, I should be celebrated and I should get credit for it. But in the same vein, that makes it so much harder for him to then level the next critique, which is, well, don't forget, Mark Carney and Justin Trudeau are the same thing, cut from the same cloth. Well, it's one or the other. And I don't really think, to be honest with you, that Canadians who are now anxious about whether our economy is going into recession or are scorecarding who exactly should be given credit for this policy change versus that policy change. The question is, will the policy change make a difference in a way that's sustaining? Will, as an example, the policy change on EV mandate, electric vehicle mandate, will it help investment in our auto sector? Will it help us weather the storm that Donald Trump is showering down on top of us with respect to the auto sector? And, the answer is, if it does, then Mark Carney's probably going to get the credit, and a bunch of the critiques and the credits snatching on the part of Pierre Poilievre isn't going to really help. He's really got to develop an alternative strategy in terms of, here's my offering as distinct from the Prime Minister, rather than saying, well, when the Prime Minister does what I've called for 2 years, that's just evidence that I was right all along. No one cares if you were right all along. They care about them, not you.
Scott Reid, political commentator with his take. Good to see you, my friend. Happy Friday, and thank you as always.
Thanks, buddy.